This is my TNA Slammiversary 2014 pay-per-view review. The pay-per-view from out there a little while ago as far as my thoughts on this show. I would say it wasn't a terrible show from TNA. I was expecting much worse, but at best it was just an average show from TNA. You did have two matches on the show that I would recommend people to go out their way to see. With the opener, six-man ladder match for the X Division title was a damn good opener, and Kenny King versus Austin Aries was really good as well. Those are the two matches I would recommend people to go out their way to see. And then, other than those two matches, the undercard was pretty weak on this show. And then, just like TNA a lot of times has a number of bad booking decisions, and they had three really bad booking decisions on here. First one was Samoa Joe losing to Lashley. Why would you have Lashley go over Samoa Joe? That was a bad decision right there. The next one was you had the Von Erichs making their debut in TNA, which kind of surprises me that the Von Erich boys are making their debut in TNA and they're going the route to TNA instead of WWE. You would think that, Vince McMahon loves bringing in talent that are, have, this lineage with, a wrestling family, and you would think they would want to bring them in, but I guess they, got this job in TNA right here, and what they did was they had them debut against the Bromans, which actually didn't look too bad. The Von Erich boys looked pretty good in the match, but you did the one thing real bad was this was in their hometown, well, not their hometown, but their home state of Texas, and you have them have the match end via disqualification. Bad thing to do right there. Then the other thing, which I think is the thing everyone will say was the worst part of the night, was Eric Young retaining the title. Even though I do got to admit the triple threat main event, which had Aries, Lashley, and Eric Young, was actually not a bad main event. It was just, why do they want to keep running with this Eric Young thing? I mean, your ratings are showing no one wants to see this shit. And you can't use the excuse of, the NBA playoffs or anything, because that your ratings are just not showing this just because the NBA playoffs. It's because people do not buy Eric Young as champion. Unfortunately, they had him retain the title on this show. But like I said, average show from TNA, two good matches. Let me get into the review of it. Opening matchup which probably was the best match tonight. Maybe the only other argument would be the Aries and Kenny King match. The opener was the six-man tag, not six-man tag, but the six-way match in a ladder match for the X Division title. This was Davey Richards versus Eddie Edwards versus Tigre Uno versus Crazy Steve from the Menagerie versus Manik versus Sanada. This was a really entertaining opener. Started off real fast with Manik diving out to the ring onto Sanada. Then you saw the Wolves, Richards, and Edwards dive outside the ring. Number of crazy spots in here. Easily the most crazy spot in this match was the spot with Manik and Davey Richards on the ladder. The sunset flip powerbomb to the ladder. I mean, that was a sick spot that Davey took right there. Sanada did some good stuff in here. And obviously had the ending where everyone knew was going to happen, which was Sanada retaining the title, which is a good thing with Sanada retaining the title. I was worried that TNA would go the terrible route of having Crazy Steve win. Thankfully, they didn't do that. Thankfully, they had Sanada just retain the title. Really good opener, fun match. Crowd was into it. Definitely one of the best things on the pay-per-view, and I would recommend people see this match. About 3.5, maybe 3 3/4 stars. Really good opener. Then after this, you have a segment with MVP coming out there with Lashley and Kenny King. Now, this was pretty much a pointless segment. MVP just did not do that good on the mic here. And the main reason why it was such a pointless segment was, now, if we didn't know what was happening with, the two matches, which it was announced already in advance of this pay-per-view, that with MVP out of action and he could not compete in the main event against Eric Young, that the replacements would be whoever is the winner of the two matches between the Lashley and Joe match and Aries and Kenny King. And we already knew that in advance. That was more or less what MVP came out here to do. He came out here, got a lot of good heel heat from the crowd. He played to the crowd pretty well, but it was just seemed like a pointless segment because it almost sounded like he was coming out there acting like we did not know these stipulations and what was taking place. But you had to have him out here at least in some type of segment, since obviously before Friday, it was obviously looking like we were going to get Eric Young and MVP for the championship on this show. And then obviously you had to have MVP out here to do some explaining to it. Just terrible segment, waste of time, I thought, even though it did have to take place. I guess you would have to say it did have to take place. Then the next matchup was the first of the number one contenders matches of whoever wins this goes on to the main event of the night. This was Bobby Lashley versus Samoa Joe, which I was actually looking forward to this. I thought these two could have a really good match. It was just average at best. I mean, it started off pretty good with some good back-and-forth brawling, a lot of stiff punches, stuff like that, but just wasn't that good of a match, didn't get too much time, and unfortunately, you have the wrong wrestler go over in the match. Lashley picks up the win against Samoa Joe with a spear. 2 and 1 4-star match. Wasn't that good of a match. Then the next matchup was something no one wanted to see. This was Magnus versus Willow. Not much of a match here. Magnus picks up the win, about 1 and 3/4 stars. Then after this, Kurt Angle comes out there. This was his segment of announcing who's going to be the next inductees into the TNA Hall of Fame, and he announced it's going to be Team 3D, which makes perfect sense. But at the same time, I would say, TNA, don't you think that if you're doing a Hall of Fame that you have to have maybe someone that founded your company, like Jeff Jarrett, even though I don't think Jeff Jarrett's a great wrestler? You kind of would have to throw him in the Hall of Fame, but obviously that ain't going to happen because of the whole fallout between Dixie Carter and Jeff Jarrett. And obviously with AJ Styles no longer being there, you probably aren't going to have him inducted. So just continuing this trend of, former WWE guys getting inducted into TNA's Hall of Fame, not stars that actually made it. Not that I have a problem with Team 3D getting inducted. I think they do deserve it. And they would deserve to get in the WWE Hall of Fame as well. But just like I said, they should be somewhat trying to put some people in their Hall of Fame that was the foundations of their company, some people that were there from day one, instead of just all these ex-WWE guys, ex-WCW guys, which is what the route looks like they're going with. Then the next matchup was Kenny King versus Austin Aries. Other than the opener, this match here and the opener are really the only two things I liked on this show a lot. Aries and Kenny King did some good stuff here, a lot of good back-and-forth action, really entertaining match. And Austin Aries picks up the win after hitting the brainbuster off the top rope to Kenny King. Very good match, 3.5 stars. Probably, if it wasn't for the opener, probably wouldn't normally be the best match of the show. But this is the opener. Really enjoyed those two matches a lot. Then the next matchup was the Von Erichs versus, it was to be announced going in there. We didn't know who they were taking on. Obviously, everyone knew it was probably going to be the Bromans, and that's who it ended up being. Which, considering how bad I think the Bromans are in the ring, the Von Erichs did a pretty good job here. I've seen some of their stuff they've done in Pro Wrestling Noah, and I haven't seen their stuff in a little while. And the stuff I did see was when they were kind of pretty green in the ring. They do seem like they've improved a lot. I mean, when you're getting trained by Harley Race, when you're doing stuff in Japan, and you're getting trained by some of the best, I mean, you're going to turn out to be good at some point in your career. And these Von Erich boys do seem like they have potential. Just the sad thing is, TNA doesn't really have that good of a tag division. I mean, maybe these Von Erich boys against the Wolves would be pretty good, because then you could have, really good tag matches with each other. But the Von Erich boys did impress me here. And the only bad part of this was the match ends in disqualification with one of the members, Bromance, coming in there with the chair, and it ends in disqualification. Then you end with their father coming in there doing the claw, and it ends, with the Von Erich standing tall. So that was the good moment right there, but at the same time, this is their debut on pay-per-view, and are you really scared to have the Bromans lose? I mean, it's not like anyone's going to care if the Bromans lose, and they're not, in my opinion, a credible tag team in the first place, even though TNA thinks, I guess they're some big deal because they both got long-term contracts in TNA. But at the same time, you should have had the Von Erich boys go over in this match cleanly, not a bullshit disqualification, especially in their hometown. That was the worst part, is you did this DQ finish in their hometown, and you had it in their hometown and their debut as well. So not a good move there, TNA. Then the next matchup was Gail Kim versus Angelina Love. I'm a huge fan of Gail Kim, but this is a match we've seen so many times. Angelina Love was very sloppy in this match, and unfortunately, Angelina Love retains the Knockouts title. It just dragged on. I mean, when you thought the match was going to end, it just kept on going and going and went much longer than what it should have. Even though it probably didn't get too much time, it just felt like it was dragging on. 1 star at best. The next matchup was Ethan Carter III versus Bully Ray in a Texas death match. This wasn't terrible, but it wasn't anything that's ever going to be memorable. Was probably watchable at best. I mean, the one thing I would have loved to see in here, but obviously you knew Dixie Carter wasn't going to take it, was Bully Ray actually living up to his promise and powerbombing her through a table. That would have been great to see, because I think a lot of people would love seeing that. I think Jim Cornette would have loved to see that. That probably would have been the one thing on this pay-per-view he would have probably loved the most, if Dixie Carter got thrown through a table by Bully Ray. Unfortunately, we didn't see that. A terrible ending for a Texas death match. That was the one really bad part of this match. And I know some people are probably complaining that there wasn't blood involved. That part didn't really bother me. Really, the part that bothered me was the very weak ending. Okay, you had Dixie Carter basically bump into EC Carter III. She was laid out on the floor. Bully Ray gets her onto the table. Looks like he's about to, dive off the apron through the table to Dixie Carter. And then you have Spud come out there, save Dixie Carter, pull her off the table, and then inside the ring, right behind Bully Ray inside the ring, you have Ethan Carter III hit Bully Ray with a kendo stick, and he lands through the table, and that's the end. He doesn't get up for the 10 count. Ethan Carter gets the win. It made perfect sense for him to win in the very cheap cheap fashion that it was a fluke that he beat Bully Ray. It just came off very weak that Bully Ray. You did a few brutal things in here, but nothing too brutal that a kendo stick and him falling to the floor to a table should have really had him get out of this match, and that should have been the ending. Just a very weak finish. Probably 2 stars at best. I would say it was at least watchable. Next matchup was James Storm versus Mr. Anderson. This wasn't a terrible match. It was watchable at best, just like the previous match. Not a terrible match, but nothing I would say you need to go out your way to see. Mr. Anderson wins. You have some of the players of the Cowboys out there. Bully Ray, not Bully Ray, but James Storm spit beer in their face. Then they try to jump over the guardrail. Then one of them distracted James Storm, and then Mr. Anderson hits the mic check to win the match. Then you have some of the players from the Cowboys inside the ring with Mr. Anderson celebrating post-match, and that's the end of that. 1 3/4 stars, 2 stars at best. Not that good of a match. Probably watchable at best. Then the next matchup was the main event of the evening. This was for the TNA title, the triple threat cage match with obviously the winners of the matches earlier, with Lashley going over Joe and Aries going over Kenny King. So you had Eric Young defending the title against Bobby Lashley and Austin Aries in a triple threat here. Wasn't a bad main event. I mean, you saw some okay stuff in here. I thought it was not a great main event, but a good main event. Not a terrible match. Obviously, I don't like the ending of it, but it was some good stuff in there. I mean, Aries and Lashley had really clicked pretty well in this match with each other. Eric Young, even though I think he's a joke as a champion, he actually did pretty good in this match. I do got to admit that. Even though I don't like him as champion, I think he's a joke as a champion. He actually did pretty good in the match. I will give him credit there. They did the spot where it was looking like Bobby Lashley was going to spear Eric Young into the cage. Lashley, not Lashley, but Eric Young gets out of the way. And then you see Bobby Lashley outside, spears himself through the cage. He's outside the ring. Then it's Eric Young and Aries towards the end of the match. They go back and forth for a little bit. A lot of yay, boo chants, back and forth punches. Some good back and forth action with these two, I got to say. But then you have, looking like Aries going to pick up the win, which would have been the smart move, especially going into your New York shows. Aries as champ would have been a great move to do, especially since you're doing the whole Destination X thing, and whoever's X Division champion takes on the world champion. And Austin Aries and Sanada had a damn good match in Wrestle 1, and I would love to see them two against each other again, but since Eric Young's still champion, we're not going to see that. So Eric Young retains the title here after hitting the pile driver to Austin Aries. Not a bad main event, just I did not like Eric Young retain. I would give the main event 3 1/4 stars. It was a good main event, not a great main event, and just had the outcome I didn't like, and I think everyone will agree that even some of the most diehard TNA defenders, I mean, can you really keep on defending this title reign from Eric Young? I mean, not only does he come off not as a believable champion, but I mean, and I don't really like using the whole idea of the whole ratings issues, but when it's showcasing that, you know, the lowest rated segments of your show are your world champion, you know, you do kind of have to take in ratings into account a little bit right there. Now, if it was showcasing that you weren't losing that many viewers and it was basically staying steady through the whole entire show, then you could not blame Eric Young for the low ratings. But when your segments as world champion are the lowest, you kind of need a change, and I was hoping they would change the title here. I mean, hell, I was so desperate that I would have probably might have took Bobby Lashley as champion, but I definitely wanted Aries to be champion. Or really, you know, if you didn't have Aries, had Joe go on to the main event, maybe try to build him back up and try to have him be champion. But like I said, not a terrible show from TNA. Just an average show. I will recommend checking out the opener and Aries and Kenny King. Those are the two best things on there. And the main event wasn't terrible, just the wrong person went over, just like in a few of the matches on here that they did some bad booking decisions. But as far as the show, I probably would still give it, you know, like I said it was an average show. I'd probably give it about a 6.25, maybe a 6.5 out of 10, because it wasn't terrible. It just wasn't that good. It wasn't that great. Wouldn't say this is a must-see show, but I would recommend checking the two matches out that I did highly recommend. And that's it for my TNA Slammiversary 2014 pay-per-view review. All right, peace.